Welcome to this Flow360 training webinar. In this session we're going to be looking at messaging and event logging in Flow360, and we're going to start by looking at event logging. Event logging is something that happens principally in the background in Flow360. A new event is created whenever something important changes. This could be a change in status for a help desk issue or service request, or an update to a works order or instruction, or something like shifting the target date or priority on a planned task, or even changing the name of a resource or location. And I want to show you some of that in action. And we're going to start by looking at my help desk list. I'm logged in as Tim on our demo system, and I'm logged in as a manager using the Pro layout on my startup screen. I'm going to go to my help desk list just by clicking on the help desk list button, and I want to just have a look at an issue that was logged on the system in relation to a boiler in the maths block that's not been working. Now currently this issue is simply logged as open. Nothing much has happened to it. And if we have a look at the Events tab, this is where all events that are created will be listed, we will see that the Events tab is currently empty. So no specific events have been logged. The issue has been put on the system, but nothing has really happened of importance since then. If we have a quick look at the Messages tab, we can see just a single message, which is that the issue was logged. So let's go back to our Details tab and just see what we're going to do with this particular issue. Initially, what I'm going to do is change the priority of this issue. I want to push it up the priority range somewhat. So I'm going to change the priority to 2, and then I want to assign it to a particular team. So in this case, I want to assign this issue to do with the boiler. I want to assign it to the plumbers, and we're going to click OK on that. I'm now going to return to my Events tab just to see what's been logged there. And we can see those two events, the change of priority and the transfer of the issue to the plumber's team, have both been automatically logged as events against this particular help desk issue. So the same thing would happen if I made additional changes when the status of an issue is updated, for example. Let's have a look at doing that. So I go back to the Details tab, and I'm just going to manually change the status to In Progress, and we'll click Confirm on that. And I'm going to go back to my Events tab, and we can see that the help desk issue status is now in progress. That has also been logged as an event against this particular issue. So pretty much anything that happens within the system that is of importance, something that really should be logged, generally is logged as an event against that object. The same thing is true for name changes, for example, or even if we changed some of the detail here of the text on this particular issue. So rather than just say not firing, I'm going to change that so that in the list views it's a little bit easier to read, makes a little bit more sense. We're going to change that to boiler not firing. And we're going to refresh the events list, and we can see the field contents were edited here. Field contents edited for field summary. Now, each of these logged events is an event record in its own right that I can drill through to by clicking on the little Go To button. So I'm just going to do that for that field contents edited event. And we can see that the contents were changed. The contents of the field summary on this particular issue was changed from not firing to boiler not firing, and it was changed by Tim Jones, and there's a date and time as to when that happened. And on the event itself are some links at the bottom on the Linked Objects tab that links the event to everything that it relates to. In this case, it's linked back to the help desk issue, which is the boiler not firing issue, and it's also linked to the contact, Tim Jones, that's actually me of course at the moment, who made that particular change. Now, all of the events that an individual has been linked to are visible to that person when they go to their home page. So I'm going to click the little home button. I'm going to go to my personal home, and on my personal home, one of the tabs I have here is a tab that says Events. And if I click on the Events tab, it's going to list all of those events in Flow360 that are linked back to me in some way or other. And you can see as a manager, I'm building up quite a nice little total here. I've got over 5,000 separate events that are all linked back to me. Now we can filter those events out if we want to, in the same way as we can filter any other list view. And of course we can sort the contents of the list as well by clicking on the various column headers. So if I want to sort the list by event type, for instance, then clicking on the event type column will allow me to do that. And of course clicking it again reverses the sort order. So works tender inquiry cancelled, works tender inquiry issued, and so on. Let's go back to sorting by the creation date, and some of these date back almost a decade on this particular account. And let's reverse that sort so we bring the most recent ones to the top. We can filter this list down, so if I'm interested in finding events of a particular type, then I can pop up the little filter panel and I can click on the event type drop down, and it will list all of the different types of events that are currently in the list for me, so that I can filter the list down to a particular type of event. So if I want to look, say, for all the events that relate to a document red flag being set to on, then I can click that button and it will find me those particular events that have been linked back to me. So the events are always listed on the Events tab against the object or thing that they relate to, whether that's a help desk issue or a resource or a room location or a works order or a project or a booking. And the events are also listed for each individual on their own homepage so that they can see which events they have been linked back to. Back at the start screen, I just want to show you that it is also possible to add some events manually. And one type of event that you can add manually is a note event. So let's go back to our boiler not firing issue, and let's say we want to add manually a note to this particular issue. If we look again at the tabs here, we can see that next to the Events tab there is a tab that says Notes. And notes are really just a particular type of event, and we can in fact add a note from the Events tab, but I'm going to show you in this instance how we can manually add a note event from the Notes tab itself. So by clicking on the Notes tab, there are currently no notes listed here, but I have a little plus button on the end. Anyone who is connected to a particular event or issue can add a note about that particular issue. The same applies to things like resources, room locations, objects, bookings, projects, and so on. So in order to add a note, I simply click on the little plus button, and you can see I have got entered in my preferences some boilerplate text that gets added automatically to any notes or messages that I send. I can edit that out if I want to, so say, well, for this note I don't really want that. And maybe there's some additional info. Just to say this is in fact an intermittent note. Now, restricted option here on the note allows me to not make this entirely public. By making the note restricted, it would mean that it is only visible to people who are actually managing this particular issue, rather than being generally visible to anybody who can view information on this particular issue. So it's worth noting that sometimes within a team you want to make notes about a particular issue or an order or a service request, and you want to keep those notes semi-private. You want to restrict access to those notes just to the team or individuals who are dealing with the issue and not make it more publicly available than that. And the restricted option allows you to do that. But this is just an ordinary innocuous note, so I don't need to do that. I'll just click the confirm button to add the note and save it as a note event against that help desk issue. So it's very simple just to add additional information, which you can then make freely available to other individuals and colleagues who have access to that particular object. So now back at the start screen, we are going to have a look at some things to do with messaging. And I want to start by taking you through your personal preferences with regard to messaging. And I'm going to do that from Tim's account by clicking the Preferences button to go to my personal preferences. On your personal preferences, you will see a tab that says Messaging. And these are the particular settings I want to pay some attention to. First of all, there's your reply to email address for any outgoing mail. You can set that to whatever it needs to be to ensure that messages do come to you. This is in addition to the setting that are on your Comms tab on your personal contact record, and your reply to email address may be different from your normal email address where you receive emails. Then you have the option of turning on or off the fact that you receive messages by email. Everything that is messaged internally in Flow360 is permanent, retained, because it forms part of the audit trail and history. And whether or not you want those messages repeated to you, mirrored to you by email, is entirely up to you. Most people leave that turned on, and that is how it is for Tim's account. But if you want to turn off the emailing, you simply set it to no, and all messages will continue to be created and delivered internally in Flow360, but will not be mirrored to email. You have an option here also to hide read messages, and what that will do, if it's set to yes, which is generally the default, when you view your messages list, any messages in your received list that you have already viewed will be hidden by default, but can of course be found again by using the filters. Then you have an option here, auto read messages, and this will apply, and you can set this if generally you receive and respond to messages from Flow360 by email, and you want them automatically flagged in Flow360 as having been read if they have also been delivered to you by email. So that's an option that you can turn on or off as required. Receive messages for major updates only or all updates. If you have it on all updates, then even minor changes to help desk issues and service requests that you have made, for instance, the change of priority or reassigning it to a different individual or team, will all be sent to you as messaging updates. If you set it to major updates only, then you'll only get the major status changes. You'll get changes from open to in progress and when things are closed, but you won't receive updates on all of those minor intermittent changes. And the final option here, receive messages by SMS. This is in addition to receiving them by email, and charges do apply if you want to receive your messaging by text as well as by email. Generally, people would leave that turned off. And then you have an option here for message signature, and this will be added to any messages or note events that you create within Flow360, so you can automatically simply sign your name and your email and contact information on there if you want to. The final two options that are here, which are currently empty on Tim's account, only show for managers, so you may or may not see those, and they're to do with boilerplate additions to messages that get sent to internal workforce and external suppliers in relation specifically to works orders. So your messaging preferences certainly come into play in relation to how messaging is dealt with in Flow360 and whether or not you receive those messages by email as well, and it's worth just checking those out to make sure that they are set up the way you want them. So let's now go back to the start and have a look at how some of this automatic messaging actually happens. What triggers a message, where do you see it, how can you reply to it, and how can you message people or groups of people in relation to a particular thing or just a private message manually. I'm going to start by going back to my help desk list and looking at that issue that we were looking at earlier in relation to event logging to do with a boiler not firing. Now on the Notes tab we've already seen we added a note. On the Events tab we've got some events listed in relation to this particular issue, and I also have a tab here that says Messages. And if I go to the Messages tab, we can see 3 messages have been automatically created and sent. The first one, which was when the issue was first logged in the system, and then it was assigned to the plumber's team, and a message was delivered to Janet Williams in relation to that, and then we had a status update to in progress. So all of those things happen automatically, and the messages are sent both internally in Flow360 and externally by email. So in Flow360, if we have messages waiting, then we'll see something like this on our start screen. In this case, I have one unread message. And if messages is one of my main button options, it will show up like that. If I've only got the mini buttons visible, the messaging icon will still light up in red. The little envelope will light in red if there are unread messages. And I can click that, or I can click the main button here. Either will take me to my list. You can see that I've clearly got my preference set up on this account to hide any messages that I've already read, so the only message that is listed is the one that I haven't read, and that is simply saying help desk issue not firing, status updated to in progress. And if I want to look at the full content of the message itself, then I can click the little go to button. Now, in the same way as events are linked to often more than one thing, messages are similarly linked, and if we look at the linked objects tab down here, we can see the message itself, we can see the help desk issue that the message relates to, and we can see the person that the message relates to as well. And then of course the message itself is in the message box up here. The status help desk issue not firing was updated, and it's got a timestamp against that as well, and we have a subject line and so on. On the message card, we have a tab that says Thread. And the thread will pull together all messages and replies to messages that are triggered in response to this particular message. And we'll have a look at threading in a little bit more detail in a minute or two. Going back to my linked objects tab, I can jump back obviously to that help desk issue where I can see again the messages that have been created. So what if I want to message someone manually about a particular issue? Back on my start screen, I'm going to go to my help desk list, and I want to send a message to Anne about a particular issue that she put on the system. In this case, to do with the lock being broken, the door lock broken in study bedroom 1. So I've gone to the issue record itself, and I've gone to the messages tab, and I can see the messages that have been generated already in relation to this issue, and I can add an additional message by clicking the little plus button here. But I'll show you another little trick here. If we go to the details tab, next to the name of anyone who's actually involved in this issue, I've got that little envelope icon. So I've got it next to the caller's name, I've got it next to Tim's name as the service manager. And I've also got it next to the person in charge's name. In this case happens to be the same person, but of course that may be somebody different. So if I want to send Anne a message about this issue, I can simply click on the little envelope button next to her name on the issue record itself, and we can see that Anne Jeffries has already been added as a recipient. The subject line has been pre-filled, so it says what the message is going to be about, and it puts some additional codes in here that relate to the unique record ID of the help desk issue itself and the ID, the unique ID of the contact that the message is being sent to and from. And the message is pre-filled, so it says location resource and it says study bedroom 1, and it automatically adds my boilerplate text, my signature text that I set up in my preferences. And all I need to do is add in whatever I need to say. So I'm just going to tell Anne that this will be done very soon and click confirm. If I go back to my messages tab, so I can see that new message that I've just created from Tim to Anne is listed in the messages, and this will be done very soon, is obviously the content of the message itself. So I can message someone directly just by clicking the little envelope next to their name. In addition to that, I can message anybody else about this issue by going to the messages tab and clicking the little plus button here and start in the contacts list, and I can simply select somebody or start typing someone's name. So if I want this to go to Chris Johnson, I can simply select, start typing Chris, and the drop down will filter automatically, and I can select Chris and add him to the list as a recipient. And then, as before, all I need to do is type in my message, and we'll try and avoid any typos, and click the confirm button. And so now I've got another message that is linked automatically to the help desk issue. The nice thing about being able to do this in Flow360 is that you minimize the amount of typing that has to happen. Because you've started the messaging process from a specific issue, everything is preset. You simply have to select the person you want to send the message to and just type your basic message. The links that take them to the relevant issue or order or object are automatically added, and you don't need to add those yourself. So messaging individuals is done in that particular way, and it relates to help desk issues or service requests, but also to works orders or projects. So if I go back to a project and we look, say, at the heating systems refurbishment project here, and I've got the personnel who are connected to this particular project. And supposing I want to send a message to that entire group of people about this particular project. Obviously, for each individual that's listed here, I can simply click the little envelope button next to their name, and the message will be set up and pre-addressed to them, and it will be automatically linked back to this project. So again, you don't have to type lots of information saying it's about this project. That is put in automatically. But if I want to message the entire group, I can do that by using the little envelope tab here at the top of the personnel tab listing. And by selecting that, I've added Tim, Chris and Steve all as individual recipients for this message, and I can type my message and click the confirm button to send it. In the same way, I can select whole groups of people, other groups of people, when I'm sending messages, and any group that I select, and I then click the plus button to add their names. I've now got 5 names listed here on the recipients for this message. Then I can simply select them from the groups and add an entire group of people in that way. And all of those messages will be threaded and linked back to this particular project. If I want to drop anybody off the list, then I can simply click the little cross next to their name, and that will simply remove them again from the list. So if I were to send this message now, it would simply go to Tim, Chris and Rod. I'll actually cancel that. So sending messages manually can be done directly from the envelope icon wherever you see it. So on a help desk issue, that might be next to the person's name. If we have a look at the project record here, we've also got envelope icons here next to the client name. For instance, I want to send a message to the client about this particular project, or the main provider if it was specified, which hasn't been yet, then I could send a message there. Or I've got the message option here, which sends to the entire personnel group, or I've got the individual messaging icons here next to the individual names. If I go to my contacts list, I can see on my contacts list I've also got that little envelope icon. So if I want to send a message to an individual on my list, again I can just click the little button and it will pop up the message pane pre-addressed to that person. This is just a general message, of course. It's not relating to anything in particular, so it has no preset subject line. I can simply put in the subject line, specify my message and click confirm, and that will send it. And in this case, that's a private message. It's not linked to an issue or a resource or an object. It is simply a private message from one individual to another, and nobody else will see that message. So it is the same as sending someone an email directly, only it is just initiated from within Flow360. So that's the basis of messaging. A lot of it happens automatically, but there's enormous scope for contacting people and having a dialogue with them, and having that dialogue maintained and updated and recorded in Flow360, which in some situations is a major bonus. It means that audit trail the history of the communication is retained and is reviewable when required. So going back to the start screen and back to my message center, let's have a look at some sent messages in here. So a message that I have sent to Chris, for instance, that was sent manually, asking Chris to look into the issue, is logged in one of my sent messages. And the thread tab here will list any replies to that particular message. And I want to talk to you a little bit before we finish about emailing and how email integration works in Flow360 with regard to messaging. Chris will have received this message by email, and in the email the subject line will be re-help desk issue lock broken, and it has these codes here that will be in the subject line of the email, and they identify the help desk ID and the ID of the person the message came from, and the particular thread, the message thread, that this message belongs to. If Chris, in his email client, simply clicks the reply button, the message will automatically be pre-addressed to the Flow360 response email account, and all Chris needs to do is to type his reply and send it. And Flow360 will pick up that email, it will link it back to this message as part of the thread of communication, and it will also link it back to the help desk issue that this message relates to. So that even if someone responds by email to a notification they've received from Flow360 that relates to a help desk issue or service request, or maybe a works order or inquiry, or a project or a booking, and they reply by email, then the email is picked up by Flow360, is automatically brought in as a new message, logged in Flow360 as part of the thread of messaging that relates to that particular object, and then is bounced on as an email to the recipient. So if Chris were to reply to this notification by email, it'll be picked up by Flow360, become part of the messaging thread related to this issue, and will then be sent on to Tim, who is the recipient, by email as well. One other neat thing that you can do in relation to email responses is that you can also send attachments, and those attachments will be picked up again by Flow360 and linked as incoming electronic documents to the object or issue that it relates to. So if you receive a notification about an issue and you reply to that by email and you attach a photograph relating to the issue to your reply, then that photograph will be picked up by Flow360 and added as an image document linked to the issue automatically. So in that way we make the messaging as seamless and simple as possible, and it allows people to respond either from within Flow360 to messages or in their email client, no matter what device or how they're receiving those emails. Lastly, returning to my start screen, I want to show you just very briefly how you set up a contact group. We saw already that it's possible to send a message to an entire group of people just by selecting the group from the group drop down and adding those people all in one go to a new message. Where do you set those groups up? Let's go to my personal home page. And on my personal homepage, I have a tab that says My Contact Groups. So I can go to the My Contact Groups tab, and I can see I've got 4 groups already set up here. So I can set up an additional group simply by clicking the little plus button, typing the name of a group and confirming. And then to add a name to a contact group that I've set up, I simply go back to my contacts list and I find the person I want to add. Let's say I want to add Peter Wilson. And on Peter Wilson's contact record, I can see a tab that says Contact Groups. Now this will only show me groups that I have added Peter to. It doesn't show me groups that he belongs to that have been set up and are controlled and owned by other people. So in this case, Peter is not currently in any of my groups, and I can click the little plus button here, add contact to group, and I can select from that set of groups that I've got set up. So I want to add Peter to the project management group, and I can click on add. And now project management is a group that's listed on contact groups on Peter's contact record. And if I use the little go to button to go to the project management group record, then I can see contacts in group. I can see Peter's been added there. And in that way, I can add any number of contacts to any number of groups that I set up and control. And then I can use those groups in order to message people collectively as and when I need to. Well, that just wraps it up for today. I hope that's given you a bit more of an insight into both event logging, automated and manual, and as well as messaging, automated and manual, and indeed messaging threads and how the interaction with email functions. You might want to try some of those things out. More information, as always, is available in the user guide, and if you have specific questions as a result of this webinar or anything else, please do contact us. support@flow360.net. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you for your time today.